Hi everyone. A bit of a different kind of video from usual, as you can probably tell from the title. Um, this is going to be unscripted. I do have some notes because I don't trust myself to go in completely unprepared, but basically, this is an unscripted, spur of the moment decision, just rambling about the Doctor Who episode 73 Yards, which aired on Saturday just gone. Part of Series 14, the first full series of the second Russell T Davies era. And I have seen people talk very highly of 73 Yards, comparing it to the likes of Midnight, Heaven Sent, two of the best, if not the greatest, episodes from the 2005 onwards run of the show. Russell T Davies even said himself that it is, in his opinion, one of the best things he's ever written. And overall, I don't really get those comments. Like, I'll get into more detail later, but for most of it, I would say yes, it was very enjoyable. But don't want to give too much away so far, but the ending I just did not really understand. I think it simultaneously gave too much away, but also not enough away. Yeah, so I'll give a quick rundown of the plot so everyone is caught back up to speed. The TARDIS lands in Wales, and the Doctor and Ruby start talking about some of their experiences in Wales, and the Doctor mentions someone called Roger Ap Gwilliam, and he says that he is a prime minister, one of the worst prime ministers, who will bring the world to the brink of nuclear annihilation. He stops himself from saying too much when he realizes that this is all 20 years in Ruby's future, so doesn't want to give away spoilers. And then they discover this circular shrine thing on the ground, which the Doctor accidentally steps on, and Ruby reads some of the scrolls, only to look up and discover the Doctor has gone, the TARDIS is locked, and there's this mysterious woman watching her. Whenever Ruby tries to go towards her, she travels backwards. Ruby comes across a hiker, played by Susan Twist, who Ruby asks the hiker to go and talk to this woman, only for the woman to say something to her to make her run away. Ruby goes to a pub, the same pub that was used in the tortured episode Countryside, and one of the customers there also goes and talks to the woman outside. He runs away as well. And then the people in the pub just, mess around with Ruby, give her a scare before all laughing at her. Anyway, Ruby travels back to London. While on the train, she notices that the woman is on the field. She sees her in the fields that the train is passing, always just standing there, stationary, but always keeping up with the train. Ruby goes back to her mum's house, mentions this woman to her. Carla goes to talk to the woman, and whatever the woman tells her makes her run away. And after some time has passed, she goes home, but she changes a lock so Ruby can't get in. And they do have a phone call, at which point Carla basically just says, "I don't come back." Kate, Kate Lethbridge Stewart and Unit discover Ruby. They try to help, only for the woman to make them all run away from Ruby as well. A couple decades past, Ruby is the least convincing 40-year-old I've ever seen, and sees on the news Roger Ap Gwilliam, who she remembers a lot telling her about. And so she decides she needs to infiltrate his political party, the Albion Party, to try and discover anything that could take him down and save the world. So, she gets in, she infiltrates the party, kind of makes a friend called Marty, and and then it is revealed that William is about to make a speech where he is announcing he is buying Pakistan's nuclear arsenal. Then Ruby positions herself so that the woman is standing next to William, which successfully causes William to run away. He resigns, and then Ruby just, it shows the rest of Ruby's life. She's old, she's living in a care home, and then somehow she becomes the old woman that's been following her the whole episode, and she's transported back to Wales when they first arrived, and I think she arrives slightly earlier though this time, I think. So young Ruby she notices her, and which causes events to play out slightly differently, and she stops the Doctor stepping on the circle. So that was I don't know how brief that actually was, but a quick rundown of the plot. I'm going to say the second Russell T Davies era so far, on the whole, I have some mixed feelings about. For the most part, I think it's much better than the Chibnall era just gone. But at the same time, it's not up to the standard, really, of his first era. And that might just be because we've had, 8 episodes, I think, so far. But, I mean, every episode has had things I have liked about them. I don't think any episode, apart from maybe this one, is out and out bad. But at the same time, they've all had their problems. Like the Star Beast, it was a lot of fun, but the ending really let it down. While Blue Yonder is weird because it feels like an episode I should love, but for whatever reason, I just don't. The Giggle, I think the Toymaker is a great villain, but the episode as a whole was a bit of a mess, and again, I'm not a fan of the ending. Church on Ruby Road, it was very good setup, a bit like this one. Most of the episode I quite liked, but then the ending, I think, was extremely rushed, and, they could have done with a bit more time for that episode, I think. Space Babies. Again, yeah, it was a lot of fun, but on the whole, a bit meh. The Devil's Chord, another one I enjoyed most of the way through, but there was just one point where the episode was dividing line between the episode being good beforehand and bad afterwards, and that was Maestro starting singing the Daddy song. Boom, I think, is kind of the exception on that. I think it was a very good episode pretty much all the way through it. Boom is definitely my favourite so far of this new era, but it does suffer from having a very Moffat-style ending. But anyway, and in keeping with that trend, there are definitely things about 73 Yards that I do really like. The vast majority of the episode is very enjoyable on the first viewing. I got through most of the episode really enjoying it. There are a lot of mysteries in this episode that I think they're all set up very well. I think Ruby is very good in this. Like, she's only been around for 3-4 episodes at this point, but already she's able to, take it on herself to save the world. And the political drama was quite fun, and also, happy coincidence, but quite topical for what's going on at the moment. But there were definitely some problems I had as well, and most of them come from the ending. Like, the ending just made everything that came before very confusing. And something I disagree with about I think one of the main disagreements I've had with people I've seen having opinions on this online is that there's a difference between an episode having mystery and an episode having confusion. Like, I would say an episode like Midnight is great for mystery because, we have no idea who or what the Midnight entity is, but we have no confusion really about how it works. We can understand the episode perfectly fine and without having any idea who this creature is. Where 73 yards, it just makes the whole thing confusing. So the mysteries the episode set up earlier on in the episode. It set up, why did the Doctor vanish? Why was the TARDIS locked? Who was the woman? What was she saying to people to make them run away? How was she able to constantly stay 73 yards away from Ruby even when Ruby was on a moving train? And to a slightly lesser extent, you also had the mystery of why does Marty hate William so much? And yeah, so a point that I realised, maybe an hour or two after I watched it, is that what I think went wrong is that they should have either explained everything or explained nothing. What they tried to do is they tried to give a half explanation that raised more questions than it answered, and not in a good way. So, like I said earlier, the ending of the episode involves somehow I think old Ruby from another 60 years into the future, merges with the mysterious woman that was following her, that transports her back in time to when the TARDIS first landed, and then Ruby becomes the old woman. And so it's just a time loop. Ruby lands with the TARDIS, lives her life, becomes old Ruby, and then goes back to be the mysterious woman following Ruby around. It answered the question who the woman was. But in doing that, a lot of the questions that I didn't particularly mind not knowing the answer to, suddenly they become, I would say they stop becoming mysteries and start becoming confusions. If you want to go there, you might even call them plot holes. So if we hadn't been told who the woman was, I don't think it I don't think it was necessary to know who the woman was. I think there's enough there that we can just say, oh, it was some mysterious Fey entity that, rose when the Doctor broke the shrine, or Ruby read the notes, or either of those. It's easy for us to just. It's not hard for us to find an explanation for who the woman was, if that makes sense. And if it was just some OP Fey entity, it would make sense how she's able to constantly stay 73 yards away, even when Ruby's on a moving train. It would make sense that she would know exactly what to say to make all these people flee from Ruby. But when you make Ruby that old woman, and suddenly we're like, okay, so how does old Ruby, who I'm not sure if she's explicitly on her deathbed, but she can't be far away. How does she then live another 60 years? How does old Ruby, how is old Ruby able to keep up with the train? When does old Ruby learn what to say to the people to get them to flee? So you got all these questions where if we hadn't been told who the woman was, I wouldn't mind not knowing the answers. If anything, I prefer not knowing the answers. But when you make the old woman Ruby, it these mysteries stop being mysteries. They just become confusion, or plot holes. And that's just the thing with the woman. There are other elements as well that I don't think are explained as well as they can be. The whole thing with Marty, um, I think what I'm guessing Russell T was going for, and I think it's relatively obvious to guess, is that it was Russell T providing commentary on. I'm not going to go into details, but I will just say what a number of MPs in the Parliament just dissolved were suspended for. I'm going to say that is my guess for why Marty doesn't like William, but that it's possible that Russell T meant for her to be a part of the curse, or someone else who knew what he was doing from the future. I think Russell T wanted to expand Marty more, but just didn't have the time. And if that's not the case, I think he should have given her more time, because it's barely even a mystery that doesn't get resolved. It just feels like a random thing that was probably more in an earlier draft, but they had to cut most of it, but didn't want to cut all of it. That's most of what I have to say about Marty. But then about Roger Ap William, there's a line earlier on, like one of the first things Ruby noticed about him, is that he says when he was growing up in Wales, he was once known as Mad Jack. Mad Jack was the name on one of the note scroll things that Ruby read just after the Doctor broke the shrine. I think it said, "Rest in peace, Mad Jack," or something along those lines. And yeah, I will come back to that point in a minute, but I want to explain things that have been blown from my head when it relates to timelines. So, you have Timeline Prime, Timeline A, whatever you want to call it, where basically this is the timeline that happens without the TARDIS landing in Wales, basically. Then is that the shrine doesn't get broken, time proceeds as normal. Roger Ap William becomes Prime Minister, brings the world to the brink of nuclear annihilation, is stopped somehow, not alluded to. Maybe he just doesn't want to go through with it, maybe he gets betrayed, maybe the rest of the world secede to his demands, I don't know, but he becomes Prime Minister, he nearly blows up the world, and he doesn't. There is no intervention from anyone. Ruby isn't part of his political party or whatever. He becomes Prime Minister, nearly blows up the world, doesn't. Then you have Timeline B, which is the one we follow for most of the episode, where the TARDIS lands, the Doctor goes, Ruby gets involved, and what I'm assuming is the case is that Ruby stops William, but she stops him earlier than he does. He only gets stopped in Timeline A. She stops him before any of the announcements happens. She stops him before he sends the man to the world, basically. She basically stops him before he barely gets started. He becomes Prime Minister, but then resigns a day later, or whatever it is. And then you have Timeline C, which, for all intents and purposes, is basically Timeline A. The difference is old Ruby from Timeline B gets sent to the moment the TARDIS lands in Timeline C to stop Timeline B from existing. A bit like Turn Left, where Donna gets sent back in time to stop herself from turning right, erasing that timeline from existence. What makes that fall apart for me is that it's implied that Mad Jack is Roger Ap Gwilliam, that in breaking the shrine or reading notes, whatever, they released Mad Jack. But Roger Ap Gwilliam exists in Timeline A. Timeline A, where they don't break the shrine, so, in theory, they don't release Mad Jack. Gwilliam is still there. So I think that was a plot point that didn't really make sense, because they're implying that somehow he shouldn't exist in Timeline A, because he's only in Timeline B because the Doctor and Ruby released him, and yet the Doctor knows of him in Timeline A. One of my friends suggested that maybe that Mad Jack escapes and possesses Gwilliam, which, it might kind of be the case, but, they end up doing the exact same thing. They have the exact same goals. Mad Jack just does it worse because he stopped earlier. And yeah, I think that's most of what I have to say about that. I mean, Russell T has struggled with endings in the past. Like, all of his famous Deus Ex Machina plots. You have the unset up, just looking into the heart of the TARDIS, which reverts Margaret into an egg. You have Rose becoming God. You have the Doctor becoming Jesus. You have Donna becoming the Doctor. And then you have the more recent ones, like you just, letting go the Metacrisis, the full of loopholes game of Catch, which none of the characters exploited the loopholes. Yeah. Then you have, in the Devil's Chord, two members of the Beatles playing one chord between them. But the difference is with all of those is, yes, that Deus Ex Machinas, in some cases, huge Deus Ex Machinas, you can understand those ones. Like, they make sense. Apart from maybe the Doctor becoming Space Jesus. But, even then, it has an explanation. You can follow it. This one, the ending just doesn't make sense. It's not even really a Deus Ex Machina. It's just confusing. I think the final point I have, really, this was just rambling. I may have forgotten something, but Ruby never lives her life as old Ruby. So, Ruby is living in Timeline B, followed by the old woman, who we're told later is supposed to be an older Ruby. Except we get to the end of Timeline B. What should then happen, if this is to somehow make sense, is that old Ruby, would be transported back to the start of Timeline B, and then would live out the old woman's life in Timeline B. But that doesn't happen. She goes to the start of Timeline C to prevent Timeline B, which means that the old woman should not be there because no one went back in time to be her. It's, if I people have compared the episode to Turn Left, so I will mention it. It would be like if in Turn Left, Donna lived in her parallel universe, and then she went back in time to stop that timeline from existing. But there was only one Donna in that parallel universe. What we're meant to be in this timeline, there are two Rubies. But yet the first one doesn't go back to be that Ruby. It goes back to stop the timeline from existing. So I think what you need in this scenario is for Ruby to live Timeline B, to go back to the start of Timeline B to be the old woman, and then the old woman to go back to the start of Timeline C. But that doesn't happen. Ruby just goes from old RWBY straight to Timeline C to stop it. But stop Timeline B from going creation, which means there's just an extra RWBY that's not accounted for. Yeah, so those are just, rambles about the episode. It could well be that later in the series, some of these questions will be answered. It will make the episode make a lot more sense, and this video will be made redundant. But I just don't get the hype a lot of people have been giving this episode. Yes, most of the way through, it was very entertaining, but the end just drags it down. I would say before the ending, it was rivaling Boom for the best episode from the second Russell T Davies era, but because of the ending, it might be my least favourite from this era. Like I said, I think they tried to answer it and not answer it at the same time. I think they should have committed either way. They should have answered everything and made the whole episode make sense, or answer nothing and leave it all a mystery. I might sound like a broken record at this point, but by telling us half of it, it neither makes the episode make sense nor make it a mystery. It just makes it confusing. So yeah, I've seen people comparing this to the likes of Midnight, Heaven Sent, Turn Left. It's just not at that level, in my opinion. And if you love the episode, that's great. I'm not trying to take that away from you. I just don't see it, basically. So yeah, those were my thoughts on 73 Yards. Yeah, I see you in another video at some point, probably, maybe soon, hopefully.